Welcome to the Single Friendly Church podcast, brought to you by Single Friendly Church Network, a UK charity encouraging churches to welcome and value single people at every stage of life. Welcome to the Single Friendly Church podcast. I'm Beth from Single Friendly Church, and this is our first episode in our new series on friendship. And we're joined today by guest Sheridan Voysey, who is a writer, speaker and broadcaster who's interested in what makes life deeply worthwhile. He's written several books, and more recently he's founded the Friendship Lab, which is a non-profit organisation that helps adults to build and maintain meaningful friendships. So Sheridan, welcome to the Single Friendly Church podcast.
Great to be with you, Beth. Really good to see you.
It's so great to be speaking to you today. So we didn't actually connect for the first time on our mutual interest in friendship. We actually heard first about your work a number of years ago when you shared a wonderful reflection on singleness on BBC Radio 2's Pause for Thought. You spoke about singleness with such a divine dignity, as you put it, and it was so encouraging for us as an organisation to hear that and to hear it shared in such a public platform here in the UK. So it's wonderful to finally be able to sit down with you years later and have a proper chat.
Yes, indeed. I mean, people who know my work will know that I am married, but my wife and I haven't been able to have children. So I guess there is some sort of resonance in the fact that for many of our audience, not all by any means, but for some of our audience, there may be something that they've wanted relationally, whether it be a partner or indeed for us, it's actually been a child. And so we can connect on those things, even though coming up to 30 years marriage soon.
Absolutely. I mean, we find in our work a lot that married couples who don't have children resonate with a lot of the same themes as single people. So I'm sure that there's so much about our work that you really resonate with. So today we're here to talk about friendship. And not only is this a topic that you're really passionate about, but you've actually founded a non-profit organisation about it called the Friendship Lab. But I know that this isn't something that you just woke up one day and decided that you were going to start talking about friendship. This is something that's really been developed from your own personal journey. So could you share a little bit about your story about how your thinking about friendship changed one day?
Yeah, for me personally, it goes back to a moment in 2008 when Maren, my wife, and I were 8 years into our infertility journey, trying to start a family. And by this stage, we were looking at fostering and adoption. And so we gathered with about 20 other people in this fairly drab seminar room to explore what was involved. And you could just tell that this very seasoned seminar leader could see in all of our faces that maybe adoption, maybe fostering would be the fulfillment of all of our heart's desires. And so she got a bit tough on us and she said, look, yes, there's going to be some wonderful blessings in being an adoptive parent or a foster parent if that works for you. But it could also get very difficult. You're going to need a support group around you. And then she asked a question that has never, ever left me, Beth. She said, who could you call at 2 a.m. when everything has gone wrong? And, I sat there with my pen hovering over the workbook because I couldn't think of whose name to write down. And it wasn't that I didn't have friends. It's just that we were 2 years into a new city and I'd been so busy that I hadn't really kind of intentionally focused on building new friendships. But then I had to also be very honest with myself and say, well, I wasn't keeping in touch with the friends that I had in other cities either. So that was my day of realizing that I needed to get intentional about friendship. I'd never learned about friendship. I'd never been told how to make or maintain or deepen friendships. I just kind of absorbed it by osmosis, like every single one of us. So when I had that kind of realization, I wasn't exactly too sure what to do. All I could think of, well, I better just remember their birthdays and put them in my diary and remember to drop them an email or say hello. All of these years later, through a completely different set of circumstances, that image and that moment came back to me when I realized that actually this was a much bigger thing than just me, and we all needed to explore that. And long story short, Friendship Lab was born.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just curious, when you realized that you didn't have that name that just came to mind straight away of what to write down for your 2 a.m. friend, what did you do next on a personal level?
First thing I could do was go, do you remember their birthdays, Sheridan? And if I did, because I wasn't too bad at noting those down somewhere, it's just like, well, be a little bit more intentional. And for those people I didn't know their birthday of, I had to have that kind of subtle question. Some of these people I've known for years. Just remind me of your birthday again, because I wanted to get into the diary, and then I put a 2-week prior notification on that. So I would be notified 2 weeks beforehand, and I would at least get a card in the mail, or at least there would be a phone call on the day or something like that. I had neglected those very basic things. Beyond that, Beth, I wasn't sure what to do. I mean, it made sense that you would reach out and get a coffee in the diary or something like that. But beyond that, I really wasn't too sure what to do. I didn't realize that there is so much that we can do to both form and deepen our friendships with lots of little micro skills that we can learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that's something that we're talking about enough as society and probably as a church as well. It's interesting that, you didn't even know yourself the steps to take. And I think that's probably very relevant to lots of people listening today. You say that we need a friendship revolution, and I think that is very much to do with what you've just said about not knowing where to start. But why do you think that we've got into the place that we're at?
A really good question. So when you look at all the sociological research, there were kind of 3 or 4 big barriers to friendship. The first one is busyness. We are busier than we've ever been before. We are completely taken up with work. When we're not working, we're scrolling. So that is a big one for us. Second one is mobility. Most of us have now moved to a city that is different to the one that we grew up in. Some of us are on our second continent in our 5th major city, not mentioning anybody's name. And on top of that, I think we've had about 13 house moves in our married life. So, mobility gets in the way as well. Whenever you up and move to another place, you try and kind of uproot some of those relationships and take them with you. And only a certain amount of those little seedlings, if you like, those little saplings will actually survive the move. Third one is shyness. But we can work with shyness. Shy people actually make great friends. You just got to get past the fear. Once you've got past the fear barrier with them, they are your friends for life because they've got a deep, thoughtful interior world. They're thinking about you. So we can work with shyness. But the other big one on top of all of this is pure old neglect, because as a culture and indeed as a church, we have pushed friendship into the shadows while we have shone the spotlight on another relationship entirely, and that relationship is romance. From our Spotify playlists to our teaching education curriculum in our schools to the fact that we know the date of Valentine's Day and we do not know the date of International Friendship Day just shows that in every way we have neglected friendship. Everybody has love songs in their Spotify playlists. Very few of us actually can find even one song about friendship. It is the focus. We're always kind of focused as a culture on romance. And then when it comes to the church, well, we've also been quite focused on marriage. We've been very big on dating and marriage and family and parenting, and that's all fine. But then also we have focused on charity. So I like to talk about this in terms of 3 Greek words that many of our audience will know. There's agape, which is that lovely Greek word about self-sacrificial love, does not expect anything back in return. We give the kind of love that we receive from God ourselves, who loves us even though there is not often very much to love, because we can just be sinners. We can be people who do not do the right thing. We're to pass that kind of agape love on to others. We've heard umpteen sermons about reaching the least and the last and the lost. The other Greek word is eros. That's, for our purposes, we'll use romance for that, and so that's been the focus as well. The other great Greek word is philia, for love, and philia is friendship. Well, in many ways, the culture has pushed philia out by focusing on eros, and the church has focused so much on agape that we haven't focused on philia. So we know all about how to serve other people. We don't know as much about what mutual, equal, freely chosen, freely given, freely received friendship is all about. So we've got a lot of ground to take, and that's what Friendship Lab is here to do, and conversation like this are all about.
Absolutely. I think that's amazing. And it's so true about the church. And that's something obviously that we are trying to address ourselves, and just shining the spotlight back on other relationships in the church, and how we can all work together as the body of Christ just to get closer and to support one another. Thinking about that idea about romance being so idolized in our society and just everywhere, you can't get away from it. And I know that that can affect us in lots of different ways. If you're in a romantic relationship, sometimes that can cause you to focus too much on your partner and not enough on your friends, as you were saying, that kind of neglect aspect. And then when you're single, sometimes you can look to the idea of having that romantic relationship as fulfilling that deep need that we all have for connection, or the need for intimacy with other human beings, and think that romance is the only way that we can get that. But could you give any hope to single people perhaps who are looking for that connection, that perhaps they could get that from friendship?
Look, the research here is amazing. If you've got a few close friends, you have lower rates of anxiety and depression, higher rates of meaning and happiness. You've got a better cardiovascular health. You've got a better immune system. Quite literally, if you've got a friend around you when you're in hospital, it's almost similar to the effects of morphine on your pain levels. All of that is available for single people, married people, whatever kind of background you are from. Let me tell you about two stories that come to mind straight away. I was speaking at a conference last year, and a newly married guy came up to me and he said, do I need friends? My wife and I were just saying last night that we've got each other. We don't really need anybody else. We've got each other. I wanted to kind of grab him by the shoulders and shake him and say, you need friends for a number of reasons. Again, the research is fascinating on this. People who have got close friends have better marriages. Why?
Wow.
Because we're not kind of putting all of our relational needs on one person who just often cannot handle the weight of that. And secondly, your friends need you. How many couples, once they kind of find that person and they kind of get all absorbed in each other's worlds, then kind of turn away from other people? So that leads to a second story that I had just last week. I was speaking at a church, at Kidlington Baptist, and a couple came up to me afterwards. And we were talking about a variety of things. And they said, when we got engaged, we made a conscious effort that we would keep on focusing on our friends as well as each other.
Wow.
We did not want to lose our friendships. And now, as they were kind of in their early years of marriage, they wanted to continue to make sure that they prioritized their friends, including their single friends. The second couple have got it. The first couple will have it now because they were awakened to the need. But it's so common, isn't it? It's so common. Something special happens. We get that special person, and before we know it, we're just kind of focused there. We need to prioritize friendship, whether it be romance that robs us of it, or whether it be work that robs us of it. We need to reclaim friendship and reprioritize it in our lives.
That story about that last couple is amazing. And we just love to see that so much more in the church, just having this conversation about how much we need friends and how much we need different people to speak into our lives in different ways. Because of course we're all different and we all have our own gifts, and we'll have a different connection with each person, a different shared interest perhaps, or a different thing that a certain friendship or relationship might bring.
Yeah, very much. There's this amazing word called homophily. You don't use it very often in general conversation, but it's really important, I think, for our conversation. Homophily, homo, same, phily, friendship or connection. So homophily is at work in every which way that we have our society. And it's understandable. We gravitate towards people who are similar to us. So if we're single, we will naturally gravitate towards other single people. This can happen, of course, ethnically, racially, politically, age-wise, even gender-wise. About 80% of friendship is male to male and female to female. So there is something understandable and I would say even appropriate about homophily. It's the starting point of friendship. If you want to form friendships, there is something about meeting somebody else in a similar stage of life or with similar convictions to you that helps to form the starting point of a bond. Where we go wrong is when we start to look at homophily from very basic categories like single, married, like racial, ethnic, and white people only have friends with white people, black with black, etc., etc. We can have homophily, we can have connection with other life experiences as well. If you and I were to start talking about our childhoods, even though we're different, even though you're female, I'm male, we'll go, oh, you know what, I've got a similar kind of experience, even if it wasn't the same in detail. Yeah. We would probably have a similar emotional journey about something in our childhood. The same thing goes for if you've gone through cancer. Well, you can connect with somebody across all kinds of lines, different kind of demographic, racial, psychographic lines, because you've got that in common. It might be some sort of hobby. It might be something else. Certainly it's a faith. That's the powerful thing about the Christian faith, is that it provides this connection point across people of all different racial backgrounds, economic backgrounds. We've got something in common because we've got a shared Lord, we've got a shared faith, we've got a shared worldview, we've got a shared spirit. So what I'm suggesting is that we find those points of connection that go beyond the superficial connections so that we could have homophily at a deeper level when we make those personal connections, share those personal stories, share those personal convictions. That's when real bonds can form well beyond a marital bond.
Absolutely. When we think about how friendship and connection enriches our lives so much, and we think about living life to the full as Christians, Obviously, one of the best places to look as an example is to the life of Jesus. And we know that he was a single man, so he didn't obviously have that romantic relationship. He was always connecting with people and people who were different to him. For yourself, as a follower of Jesus, is there anything particular that you've learned about friendship from studying Jesus's life?
I really have. I mean, there's a whole bunch of obvious places we could go. First, he had 12 disciples. He had a larger group of 72. He had 3 within those disciples that he seemed to be particularly close with. That's all good. We've got the wonderful passage in John 15 where Jesus then says to his disciples and through them, us, I no longer call you servants, I call you friends. That is profound, given who he is when he's actually God in the flesh. Plato said we cannot have a friendship with a God because a God is up there, we're down here. There is no equality. Friendship requires equality. And Jesus says, I'm stepping down to be on your level, to have that equality with you. Profound. But I think, Beth, the thing that most excites me about Jesus and friendship is actually his friendship with 3 other people that we often overlook. And that's his friendship with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Their story told in the context of either busyness or solitude or, Mary and Martha's different responses to Jesus when Martha invited him over for dinner, or indeed in the context of resurrection, because it's to Mary and Martha that he gives that profound statement about whoever believes in me will not taste death. They will experience resurrection. What we miss is just how close this relationship was. I'm now coming to the opinion that Jesus' friendship with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus may well have been his closest group of friends. Now, I don't say that lightly because he spent all those years with the disciples, but these 3 people were not part of the 12 disciples. They weren't part of the 72. They weren't his colleagues. They were his friends. And you see the story mapped out in about 3 different episodes in the Gospel of Luke and then the Gospel of John, where Jesus is always coming to their place. So I can imagine them having a little apartment. They live together. A little apartment in Bethany that's just outside of Jerusalem. And Jesus is going to their place, having meals. First episode has Martha inviting him in, but then she speaks to him in such a forthright manner and with such emotional honesty when she gets angry at him, actually, because Mary is sitting at his feet listening to everything that he's saying. Martha is busy mashing the potatoes and getting the whole meal together, and she's frustrated not just at the sister, but actually at Jesus. She says, why don't you tell my sister to come and help me? That is a level of emotional honesty in the conversation that we do not find from anybody else in the rest of the New Testament. Everybody else, it's all very deferential, it's all very respectful, very polite. Lord, what must I do to be saved? Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. It's all very deferential, dare I say it, very British. And yet Martha just gets straight to it. And I think this shows a level of intimacy that she can share her devotion to Jesus, but also her frustration with Jesus. And then later on, of course, when Lazarus dies, both Mary and Martha are completely and utterly disappointed in Jesus. When Jesus finally goes to that flat in Bethany after Lazarus has died, Mary doesn't even come out to see him for the first little while. She just can't. Martha goes out first, and then they both say, Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. It's profound. So if you really want to explore a friendship, particularly Jesus' hidden friendship, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus is the story to explore. You will see a depth of conversation, a depth of intimacy that maybe even surpasses the relationship that he had with the disciples.
That's wonderful to hear. Our founder, Jackie Elton, often talks about the relationship between Jesus and Mary and Martha and Lazarus as there probably were single people.
Absolutely. The very fact that the 3 of them live together makes absolute sense of that. They haven't kind of gone off into the marital extension of new homes and things. So almost certainly, and Jesus is a single person. He's hanging out with his single mates there.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about seeing the way that Jesus relates to them as well and visits in their home. They have meals together. They challenge each other. Would you say that there's something that we can learn about that in terms of how to define friendship? And I guess on a more general level, how would you define friendship?
Yeah, thanks for the question. This is so important because we misunderstand friendship for lack of a good definition. And this is actually a challenge in the academic world as well, is it's very hard to define what actually is friendship. Here's what Friendship Lab defines friendship as. We define a friend as someone I can talk to, depend on, grow with, and enjoy. So talk to about the little things and the large, from football scores and holiday plans to our deepest hopes, dreams, regrets. Depend on, they're the people we can call at 2 a.m. when everything has gone wrong. Grow with, This is an extra element we've particularly brought in from the Christian faith, actually, is that friends don't just simply enjoy each other or there to support or talk to. We are there to help each other to grow into the people that we are supposed to be, to become the Sheridan that I am supposed to be, not just for my own sake, but for my wife's sake, for your sake, for everybody else's sake, which means that we should be giving our friends a freedom to be able to not just affirm us and encourage us, but also to call us out where we need it. And then enjoy. There is no friendship without enjoyment. That could be because we both really have the same sense of humor, or we both really enjoy playing a particular game, might be a game of squash or something, or we might like death metal bands, or like me, we might like moody European films with subtitles. I'm sure that you like moody European films with subtitles, Bev. I hope you do, because otherwise there's no chance of a friendship between us.
I appreciate them.
Good. I'll convert you somehow. My wife doesn't like them. She says there's subtitles. We're not going to watch that. Talk to, depend on, grow with, and enjoy. Those are the 4 things. You pursue that in your friendship. Number 1, it gives you a grid because you know now what to aim for. Number 2, it's very helpful as a diagnostic because you might kind of go, there's something, this isn't the closest friendship that it could be. What's missing? We can talk to each other. You know what? I can depend on them. Gosh, we're not having as much fun as we used to. Let's go and up that.
Do you think it's sometimes a bit confusing in church when we're all part of this community and perhaps you might be in a small group with someone or sit next to them most weeks on a Sunday or talk to them over coffee and thinking that we have lots of friends, but actually when we look at the definition of friendship that you've shared, perhaps not all of those elements are there. Do you think it can sometimes be confusing in the church to know who is a friend and who is just a fellow kind of brother and sister in Christ?
Very much. Yeah, the wonderful thing, the really good news is the fact that when we walk into a church, if we're already Christians, we've already got a family to join. So these people, I don't know them from Adam, and yet I know that they're my brothers and sisters. So we've got this incredible starting point. What happens, though, is that we tend to stay at that superficial level. So at Friendship Lab and with the Friendship Lab course, we work on a 5-scale system. So we've got acquaintances, casual friends, close friends, and then what we would call a 2am, your closest friend. Friendship in church tends to hover around stages 1 to 3 maximum. So on a Sunday morning, generally it's casual friendship that we're actually developing. So that's kind of stage 2. Now, it's really good. The fact is that the church is one of the few remaining institutions that exists that brings people together regularly to connect and across, a variety of different ethnicities, racial backgrounds, economic backgrounds. So I believe that the church is one of the most potent forces for friendship that we have. What we have to do, though, is recognize that just being together on a Sunday, or indeed being part of a small group on a Wednesday night, isn't quite enough. We need to have those heart connections that build. They build through storytelling. They build through pairing off and actually getting outside of church. One of the most important things you can do, actually, for any budding friendship is to take it out of the original pot, repot it, if you like, out of the original pot that it's grown in. So if you've met through church, there comes a time where you need to say, well, we're not just going to see each other on a Sunday or even a Wednesday night. Let's go and get a coffee on Tuesday afternoon. We're getting out of our regular meeting point to discover who we are outside of that. And then it might be heading off to a movie, and then it might be coming to my place for a meal. So we're moving more and more into our intimate spaces rather than the shared spaces that we've connected in. We do that, and we're able to then utilize the best of what the church has to offer by then being intentional about taking the relationship one step further.
That's great. And when we're thinking about, obviously, church, we're often surrounded by quite a group of friends, particularly if you're part of a small group and you're kind of hanging out in a kind of group setting. And we were talking just then about Jesus and Mary and Martha and Lazarus meeting up as a group. What about people who perhaps all of their friendships are individual, and perhaps they might be close to someone from school, they might be close to someone from perhaps an old workplace and close to someone from an old church? Do we need to be part of a group of friends to really flourish, or do you think we can survive on just kind of individual relationships? Particularly, as you said, you might not connect with anyone on a deep level in your church, but there might be that one person who you meet up with outside of church. Is that enough?
Well, going back to our 5 stages, there is value in all of the stages, even the acquaintance stage, when you only maybe just get their name, that's all you know about them. There's research to show there is well-being benefits in having acquaintances. There is well-being benefits in me going outside here and just smiling to somebody in the street. It's good for them, it's good for me. So the whole way through, there are benefits in casual friendship, in seeing that person regularly, but maybe not getting to know them too deeply. There's benefits in friendship, in close friendship, then all the real benefits come in those kind of last three stages. So, but your question is a fascinating one as to whether are the real benefits for us and also for our friends get retrieved through individual relationships where they don't know each other. I don't know about that. I haven't got any research on that. There's actually very little research on group friendships. And there is something in which, can we all be friends? I've thought about this with two of my closest friends who are in Australia. And I keep on thinking, one day I've got to get DJ and Jason together because, they're two of my closest friends, if not my closest friends. They don't know each other. They're miles apart and they're quite different. And I would love to bring them together to just see if there would be a spark. C.S. Lewis is actually really good on this. In his wonderful little book, The Four Loves, his chapter on friendship has got some weaknesses. It's a chapter from its time, but boy, there's a lot of strengths in there. And one of those strengths is that he does talk about the fact that when he is with his friend Ronald, which would have been J.R. Tolkien, Ronald brings something out of his friend Charles Williams, that he himself can't bring out. And so the three of them together, they get to know each other in a deeper way because one brings out something that the other person can't bring out. So there's something very special there, very powerful. Probably not something that can be orchestrated, but I could be proven wrong on that. You've raised a great question, and I'll be journaling about that now until 2:00 in the morning. Thanks very much.
Well, yeah, it is interesting. I think the generation of those perhaps in their 30s and 40s who grew up with the TV show Friends and this kind of idealized view of friendship where, you're friends with perhaps 5 other people and you all have the same level of friendship and you all meet up together and you have breakfast together before you go out to work and then you all come back at lunchtime and you sit in the coffee shop and you discuss what's going on and you're always there to celebrate each other's birthdays and you do everything as a group. And I think sometimes that's been pegged in some situations as this is what friendship looks like. But actually, I think it's really refreshing for you to say that friendship can look so different. And, you can have individual friendships, you can bring people together, you can have those group friendships, and it all enriches us in different ways.
Yeah. Look, I don't remember the statistic, but there was some research that released just a couple of years ago that found that the majority of people are not in a group friendship like that. And particularly as we get older, it's just harder and harder for that to happen. So it was a lovely TV program. It was a wonderful concept. Some of us got to experience something like that when it might have been in high school, maybe even in university. And those of us who experience that today, well, we are very, very blessed, but it's actually quite rare.
Yeah. And it's interesting, just going back to your story and how you've said about how you've lived in lots of different places and every time you move, you kind of have to start again.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people in that situation? Because we know that life changes for so many different reasons. We might move away, we might change the workplace, or perhaps we stay in one place and our friends move away. Or perhaps if you're single, your friends get married and they have children and suddenly they have different priorities and your friendship changes. Do you have any advice to someone who kind of feels like they're at a stage of life where they're starting again in friendship?
Yeah. Well, I hope that it's not a complete starting again. So the first thing that I would say is actually don't let go of those other relationships. Don't let go of those other friendships. Whether you've moved away or they've moved away, we have wonderful technologies. One of those is connecting us right now that allow us to keep in touch with people at a level that we never could have before. We need to utilize that. So again, some of my closest friendships are in different countries, and we maintain that by having a regular monthly video call. That's how we do that. One of the first things we explore in the Friendship Lab course is it's not all about making new friends. First thing, go and re-establish connections with friendships that have drifted. You've already invested time and energy into those relationships, and you'd be amazed that for many of those, that little seed, that little sapling can actually start to grow again if you go back and water it. So go back on that because that'll give you the confidence to actually build the new relationships you might want to do. So then if you do want to build new friendships in the place that you've just moved to, we give a couple of things in the Friendship Lab course. We talk about start with who you are, that homophily thing, to start with the things that you have in common with other people. It might be a sport, it might be a hobby, it might be a life stage. Joining some sort of group that actually connects with where you're at. Start there. So start with who you are. Secondly, start where you are. So before you jump into online communities and things, start with your geographic location. There is something called the 30-minute rule, which suggests that we have more likelihood of staying in touch and building a friendship with somebody if they're within 30 minutes radius of us. Now, interestingly, that can be 30 minutes by bike, by car, by train, by plane. But as long as it's 30 minutes, then we're able to sustain that relationship. So start where you are. And then I would throw in that we would then look for the spark. And that is an acronym that I won't go into it right now, but basically the spark is SPARC. So you're looking for things in common, you're looking for personality traits, you're looking for responsiveness, you're looking for availability. That's the other thing as well. Sometimes we can move into a new place, a new city, even a new church, find that actually everybody has got their friendship circles really sorted. And the most wisest thing we can do in that situation is join the new people's group, because they are also in our stage and they are also ready and available for friendships. So look for availability. That's the other thing I would say as well.
That's great. Yeah. Have you found that in your experience of moving to a new city, the church is a great place to start in terms of building friendships?
Very much. I do not know where we would have started. I just don't know where else we would have started with all of these places that we've been to. It's been the central point for me. And I really do feel for people who don't have a church and don't have a faith. So it's not their starting point. You are left with a couple of other options. These are okay options, but they're not the strongest options. One is your workplace. That now is generally the number one place that we look for friendships in a secular sense. That's good. We've got something in common with those people. The fact is that we are working for the same organization and we know a little bit about each other. And the fact is that hopefully if we're in the office and we don't have too much remote working, we also have a place to meet regularly and get to know each other more. So there's some real benefits to finding a friendship in a workplace. But what the church offers is, again, that overriding sense of connection, that I walk in already and I have something in common with you that is actually transcendent, beyond the everyday existence of work. We believe in the same God. We pray together. In fact, as strangers, we can sit down in the church and actually pray together. That's incredible in terms of the vulnerability that brings out, the trust that can engender. So we really do have a head start, actually, when we can go and join our local church when we move to a new city.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes we find at Single Friendly Church that someone who has perhaps had church hurt can find it harder than to join a new church and to start to build those friendships. How can you move from having a bad experience perhaps in friendship or in community of perhaps rejection or not being understood? How can you move past that and start again, particularly for someone who might be looking to join a new church or make some friends?
We've got a whole session focused in the course actually on betrayal and how to contain that. A lot of people who have been betrayed by a friend then feel very, very hesitant to walk into new friendships. And of course, that is a double tragedy. The first tragedy was that this friend actually betrayed your trust. Second one is that they got a second win in the fact that then they've stopped you from making friends with other people. I think the same principle can apply to those who've been hurt by the church as well. Is that firstly, we want to contain that betrayal, that hurt, and recognize that happened by one person, a certain group of people in one church, and to not let that then so rob us of the future experiences that we can have in a different church with different people. If we just colour everybody with the same brush from that point on, we are the ones who lose out. And it's the same with friendship as well. Contain it to this person at this moment. And then the wonderful thing is you can redeem that. You can recycle that. You can take that on into your next set of friendships, your next set of relationships, because you can say, what I have experienced from them, the betrayal that I've experienced, I will never visit on somebody else. And so instead of just being its victim, you can actually rise above that and recycle it and then turn that into something very positive. You can mine that full of its riches and then say, okay, what would I never want to do to somebody else from that experience? Well, I will always be the trustworthy one. I will never break that confidence with what that person has shared. As tantalizing and as tempting as it is for me to do, to even just share it as a prayer point to somebody else, I will not do that. It will make you a better friend if you recycle that loss, that grief, that hurt, that pain, that betrayal into something good. Please don't let other people stop you from enjoying the riches of new friendships.
Oh, that's amazing. It sounds like the course, the Friendship Lab, it's got so many amazing elements. So let's talk more about it. So obviously, as a Friendship Lab, you provide courses and training, and it's all evidence-based. It's all based on research. Is that right?
Yes. My goodness, we spent 4 years on this course. So there was working on all the secondary research that it was out there. And then we ran pilots. We had 80 people from 4 different countries who were all participating in our online and in-room pilots. then we had an anthropologist from the University of Leicester who came and did deep dives with a group of those people, 2-hour conversations pre and post, to find out just how much the course actually helped. And the wonderful thing was it was found to not only help people with their friendships and their social confidence, but also to help them with their well-being. The researcher actually said to me, I saw a countenance difference in people's faces before and after the course, which was very exciting to us. So we have worked very hard on this, because what are the main transferable skills? That was the thing. We could have gone for weeks on this course, but we just wanted to keep it down to 6 sessions. What are the transferable skills that we can all learn and then pass on to others, so that we might see this loneliness crisis that we're enmeshed in right now? We really might see the tide changed on that. But at the moment, nothing else is working. That's what we aim. That's the big goal. We want to see so many people do it that, before we know it, we're starting to see 20 to 25% of people who've got no close friends start to drop down to 24, 23, 20 and 15, and within 10, 15 years to actually see that reduce significantly.
Well, no, that's so good. And it's so needed. And I think we find that in the church, we're very good at advising on married relationships. We notice at Single Friendly Church that a lot of churches will run marriage courses. Sometimes they'll run parenting courses for how to, parent, but also just improve your relationship with your children. And yet we are neglecting talking about these practical elements on a friendship level. And have you found in your experience that churches have a need to talk about friendship?
Very much. And churches that I'm speaking to and church leaders are waking up very rapidly to the fact that what we've done so far in talking about fellowship, which we've often talked about, isn't enough. That's, again, stages 1 to 2, that we need to really go into friendship. So I'm very, very excited to share with you that we are at the point of releasing Friendship Lab for Churches, which takes the course that's available for any individual right now, combines it then with a leader's guide, with all sorts of promotional materials and all sorts of other elements, so that it's like a plug and play. You can just run it in your church, either as a course or right through your small groups, or as one church is doing right now, they're actually doing a whole campaign for the next 6 weeks. So there's sermons on a Sunday, and then all of their groups are doing the Friendship Lab course during the week. The course is all about how do we make our friendships thrive? And it's there for those of us who are part of that 25% who don't have any close friends right now, but also to people who think that they do actually have friends. How do I deepen them? 40% of us want to deepen the friendships that we have, but we don't know how. So it talks about all of those kinds of things. How do we deal with one-sided friendship? How do we deal with a friendship where I'm the only person who's always reaching out to arrange a meetup and they never contact me? I'm always contacting them. That's a big one that we get a lot. How do we deal with financial differences between friends? What do we do with other political differences, indeed religious differences? What about male-female friendship? All of that is covered in the course. So we are very excited to see churches. Right now, we've got churches piloting the course in 3 countries, and we're expecting that to move to a 4th very, very rapidly. And then we will be rolling that out very, very soon to churches across the world. So cannot wait.
Wow, that's so exciting. I think it'll be really interesting to go and get in touch with some of those churches, in a year, and find out how it has impacted the relationship between congregation members and how people's friendships have been deepened, and just empowering them with those tools, as you say, to go deeper and how to just enrich their lives.
Yeah. And I dare say that actually many of your audience would be brilliant facilitators of that course, because those of us who maybe haven't had the relationship that we wanted, I know that there are some people who have been more than happy with being single, but for many, it hasn't been first choice. Just like for many of us without kids, it hasn't been our first choice. But we have learned so much about the value of platonic friendship, platonic relationship as a result of our status, that you would be a wonderful facilitator of the course. So it'd be lovely to do that. But whether you come on board with Friendship Lab or not, I'm just grateful, Beth, that your organization exists. The Single Friendly Church is there because we're operating with similar desires. We want to see the breadth of relationships celebrated in the church because we've got all this potential. Let's just harness that. Let's ride that horse for as far as it'll take us, because the world needs it, and indeed the church needs it, and indeed you and I need it.
Absolutely. And I think it's knowing where to start, isn't it? Especially for the churches that we work with. Often they want to do something for single people, and they come up to us perhaps at an event and they say, we've been having this conversation in church about how perhaps single people don't feel fully welcome in church, or they haven't had an opportunity to use their gifts, but we don't know what to do next. I'm sure it's a very similar thing with friendship. And it's interesting what you said right at the start of our conversation about how you realized that you didn't have anyone you could call on at 2 a.m., any specific person And now thinking about the full circle moment where now you have this course, that you now have these steps that, gosh, I bet you wish that you had at the time.
My goodness. I would have had better friendships faster, that's for sure, and closer friendships. And indeed, with the other moves that have happened since, some of those relationships, I think, would have sustained the moves. So much more that we can learn. We just need to be intentional. It's all about being intentional.
Absolutely. Out of interest, how did you start to create the course? After realizing your need for friendships and reaching out and writing down their birthdays, how many steps were there in between to setting up the Friendship Lab? Was this a bit of a light bulb moment, or was it a slow journey and a slow process?
No, Beth, I lived on that for about 10 years. I didn't really know what else to do. And then I can take you to a second part of the story, which is 2019 or so, I went away for a prayer retreat, just a one-day prayer retreat. And I knew that I had a big birthday coming up in a couple of years, and I was kind of saying, well, Lord, what do I do? What's the next season? Do I keep on doing what I've been doing? That's been fruitful. I'm happy to do that if that's what you want. Or is there something else for me to do? I had an inkling that there was another big project in me left, but I wasn't too sure what it was. Well, by the end of that prayer retreat, I really had a sense that I should focus on loneliness and friendlessness. And I left that retreat skipping because I thought I had my next book project. I thought I would do exactly what I've done in the last kind of 10, 15 years. I've written a book about something, then I've gone and spoken about that, then I've done media out of that. So that's what I did. So then as 2020 rolled out, a couple of things happened apart from a big pandemic, although that was related. I read a little article for The Times, and The Times article got a lot of traction. So I thought, okay, I'm onto the right topic here. I took an idea to Radio 2 for a Sunday night little documentary series. And they said, well, no, why don't we run this across the whole week? And so suddenly I found myself as the creative lead of Radio 2's Friendship Season. Now, you don't just walk up to the biggest broadcasting network in Europe with an idea and suddenly find yourself as the creative producer of a week-long season. So I was like, okay, this is the right topic. This book is going to be so important, so needed. By the end of 2020, I had the book researched, I had an outline, I had the first chapter or so written, and I felt that there was a handbrake on the whole project. So I went back to that retreat center for another one-day prayer retreat. God normally speaks to me most on retreats, just the way I think I'm wired. And about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I had this very, very clear sense. I'm reluctant to say God told me, but I clearly heard the voice of God say, Sheridan, you are thinking too small. You've been thinking about how to write a book and get it out there. What if instead you focused on the 25% of people who've got no close friends and how to bring that percentage down? What would that take? And Beth, I realized even if a book did well, it would not move the dial on that percentage one iota. And so for the rest of the retreat, I started brainstorming, well, what would it take? Well, that would take media collaborations and arts collaborations and schools collaborations. We would need documentaries and podcasts. We would need an evidence-based course. And I left that retreat shaking in my boots because I realized that this was my calling and this was far beyond what I could do in my little study here, writing a book. This was going to require so much more of me. And indeed, it's been a 4-year investment in the course, turning that original work on the book into then a course that then we piloted and we trialed, and then opening up a year ago and now rolling it out into churches and everything else. So this is my last big calling. I know that. I'm only 53, but I know that this is my last calling. This will lead me out until whatever day my final day comes, because the need is so huge. The topic has been so neglected, and the demand is so great. Wherever I speak, people awaken to this idea. I've never given any thought to this idea of friendship, and I need to.
Wow, that's lovely to hear. And we're so grateful that you've stepped up to such a big challenge of trying to get the spotlight to be put back on friendship and helping to equip people to do that for their own lives. It's also just wonderful to hear how this journey started from your faith and from, a connection with God and a real sense of calling.
Blame God. It's all God. It's all God's idea. Blame God. I can't take any credit for it. That second retreat, it's all God's idea.
Amazing. Just to finish, thinking again about friendship through that lens of faith and the way that perhaps God has spoken to you about friendship, is there a Bible passage or anything about friendship that has particularly struck you, perhaps in the past when you were reflecting on that retreat, or something that is really resonating with you now that you'd like to share with people?
It has given me a new lens in which to read Scripture, in fact. So when we read of Moses walking out to the tent of meeting in Exodus chapter 30, 31, or so around there. Moses walks out to the tent of meeting and God comes down in the cloud, meets him in that tent of meeting and speaks as a man speaks to his friend. You just realize again how profound that is. But the passage that I've been reflecting on a lot recently really started grabbing me when I was working on the 5th session of the Friendship Lab course, which is where we deal with the problems of friendship. I was going into all of the research. What are the major barriers to friendship? And as much as I was going into those, there was one passage that kept on resonating with me as the antidote to that. And it was 1 Corinthians 13. Now, the interesting thing about 1 Corinthians 13 is that it's read at almost every wedding. It's a beautiful passage. But the original context is not about romance. It's about a group of friends in a church just outside of Greece that are wrestling with getting on with each other, that have all sorts of barriers going on with each other. So let me read it, but let me read it in its context and with changing that word love to friendship so that it's kind of within the bounds of what it was originally intended for. So friendship is patient. Friendship is kind. It doesn't envy. It doesn't boast. Friendship doesn't dishonor others. It isn't self-seeking. It's not easily angered. Friendship keeps no record of wrongs. Friendship does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Friendship always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. This kind of friendship never fails. That, I think, gives us all the virtues that we need to make our friendships thrive in one little passage like that. But that passage is all about friendship. We could spend a whole year exploring that in concert, in conversation with the social science that it really is the solution for.
That's amazing. Sheridan, thank you so much. I think this whole conversation has been so inspiring. Personally for me, but also for anyone who's single, who's listening, who might be thinking about how I can invest more in my friendships, and also churches listening in and thinking about how we can foster really good friendships in our congregation. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of your wisdom of friendship.
Oh, thank you, Beth. Thank you for the great questions. Thank you for your heart. And I'm so grateful for the work that Single Friendly Church does.
It was so great chatting to Sheridan. To find out more about the Friendship Lab, then you can visit their website at friendshiplab.org or follow them on social media, and it's just at Friendship Lab. If you've enjoyed this conversation, make sure that you follow us on social media. We're just at Single Friendly Church. We've got lots of resources on our website, and we'll be continuing this conversation about friendship on there. And do subscribe to the podcast as well, where you can get future episodes about friendship and other things single friendly related. Thanks for listening.